So can I just welcome our next guest? A lot of you will know him. This probably sounds a bit of a sexist comment, but he's the most hard-working man I think I've ever known. But I just would like to welcome Chris, father of Henry and father of two lovely twin girls. So please welcome.
Good afternoon. I get the slot after lunch while everyone's still digesting. I'm going to try and talk a little bit about our experiences and our journey and try and just bring some of the points about choice back through, because I think actually it underpins everything that we're trying to achieve, everything that you guys are trying to achieve as practitioners. And I think it's one of those things that's talked about a huge amount in maternity until the baby dies. And then everybody stops forgetting about choice and starts focusing about being clinical. And actually I think it goes the other way. And what I want to illustrate with that is, and some of you, if you've seen me present before, will have seen this. Actually, this is a really challenging topic for all of you as practitioners. But when you strip it back, you don't need to go more clinical when you're in these situations. You need to go less clinical. Because, and Nicole said it this morning, actually all we need you to do is walk with us. It's as simple as that. So we stop worrying so much about whether or not you're getting a routine feed on a CTG or whatever else is coming through, and you just worry about being kind, compassionate human beings. And if you get that bit right, everything else will follow from there. So the choice and the compassion and the kindness all really do go hand in hand. So we found out in the autumn of 2013 that my partner was pregnant, and she was a 42-year-old insulin-dependent diabetic first-time mother who did the whole pregnancy in an Elizarov frame. If you don't know what one of them looks like that. So that's reduced mobility, that's lying on your back, not your side. That basically guarantees that you're in a high-risk pregnancy, even without all the other stuff. But it was pretty smooth. And so all of the stuff that you'll see as I talk through antenatally, if you look between the lines about everything in the next few slides, what you'll see is us making choices. All the way through, we're making choices. I concentrated on getting important stuff like soft rugby balls. That's a choice. What baby grows we're going to get, that's a choice. All of these, they don't feel like choices necessarily at the time. They just feel like you're buying fun stuff for your first child, but actually they're choices. I got to the 20-week scan to find out whether we're having a boy or a girl, because that's what the 20-week scan's for. If you're an expectant first-time parent and you don't know any better, that's what it's for. We got the sonographer to write the sex of our baby in a card because I wasn't there, and we opened it together. When I got back, that was a choice. We needed to choose a name. By definition, that's a choice. My little boy's named after my best friend from school. His name's Henry. He was killed in a car accident when we were 14, so I always wanted to make sure that my first son was named after him. And actually, so that's a choice that's been brewing for 20 years. But all the way through, these are choices. Still no issues. We decided that we were going to go to antenatal classes at the hospital. We made the choice to do that. 3 antenatal classes. And I've said it before, and I'll always keep saying it. Actually, if you're delivering antenatal classes, that's an opportunity to talk about safer pregnancy messaging, because that's the captive audience to get that message across to those parents when they're there to listen. They are, after all, antenatal classes, not postnatal classes. Carried on with the important stuff. We were having an induction. That was a choice of sorts, defined by my partner's diabetes. That at 38 weeks, the recommendation was for an induction, and we saw no reason to argue with the professionals on that. We just backed what they were telling us. That was the choice that we made to do that. Going out and buying giant bears for £15 on buy and sell groups on Facebook is a choice. All of these things are choices that you're making with the best of intentions and all your hopes and dreams still intact. Leaving the finishing touches of your nursery until the last weekend before your baby's born is a choice of sorts. I have a habit of leaving things to the last minute. There's no coincidence that my charity colleagues started laughing in the corner at that point. And then on the 30th of April, you'll have seen that the induction date was the 2nd of May. On the 30th of April 2014, our world was turned upside down. When I was at Macclesfield District with work, an hour and a half or more, 2 hours from Harrogate where we lived. And I got a phone call as I pulled into the car park to say, you've got to come home. Henry's gone. And we're at 37 plus 5, and we're 48 hours out from the start of the induction that was going to bring our first child into the world. And that comes completely out of the blue. We knew nothing. There were no underlying reasons for this. There was nothing underpinning what had caused that to happen. I didn't really know what the ins and outs of that were. I just knew that whatever had happened, it was bad, and it was going to change our lives forever. And at that point, choices stop. Because you don't have a choice. There's nothing you can do because your baby's died. So you no longer have a choice. This is the new path for your life, and it's all defined by that particular incident. But actually, there is no such thing as no choice. There is always a choice. It's just a question of whether or not it's a bearable one. And in some situations, some choices are worse than others. When you get a couple of days between finding out that your baby's died and going in to deliver them, that's where you're left, in a void. Steph touched on it earlier when she talked about her experience, and I'm sure David will touch on it later on. These are the situations that you're left with, where actually you don't know what to do. You don't know what your choices are. Nobody's told you that you had any choices. People have just told you that your baby died and see you on Friday. So 2 days later we went in and we had an induction process, and it lasted about 12 hours altogether. I think the active labour part of it was probably only the last 2 or 3. Bryony got really sick. She had preeclampsia. She was running a blood pressure of about 220 over 140. I was pretty sure she was going to die as well, but actually we weren't really given any choices in anything. That was the only conversation about choice was her wanting a cesarean section and the consultant saying no. That's pretty much the only conversation that took place about choice in the whole situation. But at 9:05 in the evening on Friday the 2nd of May 2014, Henry was born at 38 weeks, weighing 4 pounds 13.5 ounces. And nobody batted an eyelid, because nobody picked up on the fact that 4 pounds 13.5 ounces at 38 weeks is massively growth restricted, because we weren't picking up on stuff like that 5 years ago. Nobody knew enough about it. So the professionals weren't in a position to make the choices about the right care for us antenatally, because they hadn't been equipped with the right information in advance. So all these pictures were taken the first evening. And what you'll see as you look at these pictures is a mum holding her son who's already got his tags on, who's already got his baby grow on, who's already wrapped in a blanket. And Steph talked about this earlier. This is a removal of choice, because actually there was no skin to skin. It wasn't discussed, it wasn't offered, it wasn't provided, it wasn't taken up. By the time that photo's been taken, somebody's already cut Henry's cord. It wasn't me. That wasn't offered, it wasn't discussed, it wasn't taken up. So actually, kindness and compassion and choices come back together all the time, because all of these offerings are about empowering parents to get the best care they can, and you do that by giving them choices and options. The photo in the middle at the bottom is the only photo that I've got of the three of us together. It's one of my favourite photos in the world, and it has a thumbprint in the top left-hand corner. I was speaking to a lady called Nikki, who's a friend of mine, who runs the charity Remember My Baby. They've been mentioned a couple of times today already. Before today, was everybody aware of Remember My Baby and who they are and what they do? Was anybody not? We're all clear about who they are and what they do now? Anybody still not sure? Fab. So Nikki said we can offer, apart from the photo shoots that they do for parents, they also offer a retouching service so they can tweak photos and edit them and improve the quality of them. And she was at a day that Steph and I were speaking at, and she said, I can take that thumbprint out for you if you like. Somebody just gave me a choice. It wasn't a medical professional, but it was somebody who runs another charity. Do you want that thumbprint taken out, yes or no? And the answer was, no thank you. And the reason is because what that thumbprint tells me is that at the moment that photo was taken, there were 4 people in the room. There were 2 parents, 1 little boy, and 1 midwife. Because actually, good quality midwifery care stays with bereaved parents forever. You're the ones that we're going to remember, and there's a reason for that, because actually you provide good quality midwifery care on a normal day-to-day basis. A family comes in, They have their baby, everything's great, you provide great care, they go home, maybe they remember you, maybe they don't, but tomorrow they're going to meet friends and family members, the next day they're going to meet friends and family members, and for possibly 80 years into the future, that baby's going to go on and meet other people. For us, for the people sitting in this front row, we can count on the fingers of one hand the number of people outside of our families who ever get to meet our children. So for bereaved parents, the impact of good quality midwifery care is off the scale compared to how it is in normal, conventional, happy ending setting. So no thank you, I don't want that thumbprint taken out, but thank you for the choice. And we had access to a cold cot, and we had access to a Moses basket, and we had access to a bereavement suite, thankfully. And we had access to time. And all of those things are important, and they're all very empowering with choices. I'm going to talk a little bit about our midwife in a minute, because she has made a huge impact in our lives. But what I want to say about memories and memory making, because I think memory making in a bereavement setting is the absolute epitome of choice. What you offer or what you don't offer, offering everything gives us more and more choices all the time. And actually, what I like about this phrase, the best thing about memories is making them. I love our midwife to pieces. I wouldn't change the world about her. However, I have hand and footprints because she did them. Nobody asked me if I wanted to do them with her. Nobody asked us if we wanted to bathe him. Nobody asked us if we wanted to change him. Nobody asked us if I wanted to have a go at doing the hand and footprints and then she'd do a good set. Those weren't conversations. So I have memories that we were given, but I didn't make them. And I think 5 years ago that's okay, because 5 years ago that's how it was done. But it shouldn't be how it's done anymore. And in a lot of trusts, it's not how it's done anymore, which is amazing. More and more people now, when I speak to more and more bereaved parents now, they talk about being involved in the act of making those memories, physically doing them, giving them the chance to hold tangible memories, giving them the chance to make their memories. And they also say, we were given the option. Because that won't be right for some parents. Some parents won't want to do that. So the choices and the memories come back hand in hand all the time. This is the bit in this whole process that I believe where the kindness and the compassion and the memories and the choices all come together. I want to talk a little bit about leaving the hospital and leaving your baby behind, because it's been touched on a couple of times today already, and it's very significant, particularly in the context of the report that came out this week. I read the news article about the report that came out this week, and one of the bullet points I saw in there was at some point in the however many years that are being investigated in Shrewsbury and Telford, somebody's baby was referred to as it. We got that too, in Harrogate. We were getting ready to leave, and the maternity support worker came in, clearly miles out of her comfort zone, and said, "Shall I take it now?" And I nearly threw her out of a window. It's the only time I can be grateful that those NHS hospital windows don't open more than about this much, because she would have gone through it from the second floor, because that's not okay. And Jackie touched on it this morning when she was talking about Elle Wright's little baby Teddy, and I'll touch on it now. That's my son. He's got a name. It's not an it. We also had a conversation with the midwives that has been touched on today about how Henry was going to be transported to the mortuary, because that was really important to me, just as it's really important to some of the speakers that you've already heard from today. And they said, as we've already heard from today, we've got a bag. And I said, no. It wasn't a choice. We weren't given a choice. I created that choice by refusing, just like Karina created a choice by refusing to consent to go to theatre unless she was allowed to do it on her terms. I would not allow, in the context of today's topic, I would not allow my son to be taken from the labour ward to the mortuary in a bag. So he went in the cold cot with a lid on. It looks a little bit like a coffin on wheels. Kind of was, in the context of the situation. But he went with some dignity. And that's really important. So the kindness and the compassion and the choices, combining all of those things, what that actually produces for these babies and their parents is dignity. And that's the thing that matters the most to us. And it was touched on just before the break. People will change their minds. Sam touched on it in the Q&A after Karina's session. Parents will change their minds when you offer them things, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't continue to offer them those things. And I always compare it to one of these jigsaws, specifically a jigsaw of baked beans. I get a 5,000 piece jigsaw, or even a 550 piece jigsaw of baked beans, and I tip it all out on the desk, and you get a couple of parents to come along and start doing it, and half an hour after they've started doing it, you come along and go, do you want to come and do some hand and footprints? Do you want to wash your baby, dress your baby, bathe your baby, have some photos done? They're probably going to say no, because they're stood looking at a massive pile of jigsaw pieces that all look the same. If you come back 12 hours later, and they've got all the corners in, a couple of sides sorted, a big chunk in the top right starting to take shape, they might say yes if you ask them the same thing, because their brain is starting to put things into some semblance of order. And I think, for me, the key to providing good bereavement care is understanding that we're not thinking straight, we're not seeing things clearly, we're not hearing things clearly. You guys have to be our eyes and our ears and our brains for us, because we can't cope with that. Our brains are over capacity because we're trying to do jigsaws of baked beans. So you have to help us out. And if that means coming back and offering us something a second time or a third time, then that's absolutely fine. This is Amanda. She's our midwife. I love her to pieces. She's a great, great friend of mine now. And actually, in the context of how bereavement care was provided 5.5 years ago, she did it flawlessly. She did handprints, she did footprints, she called him by his name, she gave us time, she understood, she didn't try and sugarcoat things, she didn't try and make our pain go away, she just understood that all she had to do and all she could do was mitigate it for us as best she possibly could. She came to his funeral, and she's an important part of our lives now. Do I think that somebody with the midwifery skills of Amanda would have provided exactly the same care in 2019? No, I don't. I think nowadays she'd be inviting parents to do hand and footprints. She'd have asked me to cut the cord. These are things that have really been hammered through in the last 5 years, largely because a lot of parents are standing up and saying, no, actually I wanted something more than that. I wanted a different experience. I wanted a better experience. And you can make bereavement experiences better than they are. Don't think you can, because it's the worst thing that anybody can imagine, but you can. And I found this, and I think it's really significant, but actually what I take from this is everybody's different. Everybody's choices are different. Everybody's decisions are different. Everybody's circumstances are different. So everybody's going to react to things a different way. So if you fall into the trap of thinking that this family won't want X, Y, or Z because the last 5 families that you offered X, Y, or Z to all said no, and therefore you don't offer it because everybody's always said no to it, you may be missing a trick. All of this stuff is to offer because actually certain parents will take different options. And like I said before, there's always a choice. We can easily fall into the trap. We can all easily fall into the trap. And I did it at the moment that I found out that my son had died. Well, we've got no choices now, that's it. But actually, that's just an illusion. The people that create those choices are you guys. You create those choices for us because you understand and you're slightly more objective, whilst still allowing to be emotionally involved in the situation. You can be slightly more objective about it than we can. And actually, turning stuff down is a choice in itself. If you offer us something as a choice and we turn it down, that's a decision, and that's empowering as well. And what's really empowering about that choices for parents is it gives you some control back, particularly for dads. It gives you some control back, because actually when your baby dies, all your control has been taken away. Sometimes even offering a dad a cup of tea when he's in the bereavement suite on the labour ward is empowering, because now he has a choice. Do you want a cup of tea or do you not want a cup of tea? It sounds utterly trivial when we're stood here on a Saturday afternoon, but actually in the thick of that moment, the decision about whether or not to have a brew is significant for them because it gives them something to latch onto. And even if you don't want one, turning it down is still empowering. Turning down that opportunity is still empowering. If it's not right for you, like the jigsaw puzzle, by the way, if I say no to a cup of tea now, I might still say yes in a couple of hours. And this is where, and I've never watched Game of Thrones, so I don't know how I've ended up with a Game of Thrones quote in here, but this is the trap we can fall into. We think because actually it doesn't matter which choice parents take in this situation, there's no good choice, there's no happy choice, therefore there's no choice. Actually, there's always choices. It's about picking the one that's right for them, that's going to give them the most gentle path through their experience. How do you prepare yourself to leave a hospital without your baby? You can't. There's no chapter in the books. There's no real guidance anywhere. I looked it up. I went to that Pregnancy for Dummies book that I'd amusingly been bought. And there's, right towards the end, there's one of those little boxes about stillbirth. And it basically says, sometimes babies die, sorry about that. That's the only thing that's covered in the entire book, Pregnancy for Dummies. That's the only bit that says, actually, sometimes this journey goes a different way. Memory boxes are hugely important because they empower you not just to receive memories but also to make them. But what they also say, because they tend to come from charities, whether that's little local charities doing their own or whether it's big national charities like For Lewis, what they also say is you're going to be okay. Because actually someone somewhere went through this once, survived, and is now running a charity that makes memory boxes for you. Therefore, you will survive. And that's hugely empowering as well. Planning a funeral presents choices. These are not the kind of choices that you expected to be making 4 or 5 weeks out from the birth of your child. But they are choices nonetheless. We had a lot of back and forth with the hospital because we had basically been told the hospital funds the funeral, therefore we'll tell you the date, you just turn up, that's it, we'll sort it all out. And I wasn't okay with that because that's my son's funeral, that's the only thing I ever get to do for him. I'm going to make the choices about this. We had to deal with a lady who was one of the admin secretaries at the hospital about it, and she was miles out of her comfort zone, a bit like the maternity support worker, if not worse, because one minute she's talking about people's car parking tickets not working in the machine, and the next minute she's talking about a baby's funeral. That's impossible as a professional. She's not even a clinical professional. That's impossible. But she said, this is how it is, this is what you are. Basically, it's a tick box form. So it's a white coffin. I said, I don't want a white coffin, because all I could picture when I was described to me like that was those little sort of painted fences you get around the outside of village cricket grounds. I didn't want like a white painted coffin. I thought it would look tacky. So I said, no, I just want a normal wooden coffin. Oh, not sure. Might cost a bit more, so don't care how much it costs. I'm not going to spend stuff on clothes for 3 to 6 month babies, 6 to 9 month babies, or anything else forever. How much is this going to cost? Not sure. I have to ask the funeral director and come back to you. Can I not just ask the funeral director myself? No, that's not how it works. You ask me, I'll ask her, she'll give me an answer, I'll come back to you, and if you've got follow-up questions, which was laborious, if you'll pardon the pun, until I went directly to the funeral director because I got bored of having all this back and forth. And the funeral director said, no, it's not a white painted wooden coffin, it's padded, it's quilted, it's beautiful, here's a sample of what it looks like. Which one do you want? I said, I want that one. I want the white one, the padded one, the quilted one, the beautiful one. But the funeral director, straight away, if you still want the wooden coffin, you can have the wooden coffin. If you want the white quilted one, we can change to that. Not a problem. Choice. The funeral director got it. Could we have done anything differently about our experience? In the context of what we knew then, no, probably not. In the context of what we know now about intrauterine growth restriction, yeah, absolutely. Customised growth charts, more scans, better identification of babies that are small for gestational age, and probably an earlier intervention. 37 weeks probably would have saved his life. Please don't forget about the dads. I know a couple of people have touched on it already, but it's really easy to overlook dads, but really easy to correct that. Just turn around and get them involved. How are you doing? I can count on the fingers of one hand the number of times in the first year after Henry was born that anybody in the street came up to me who wasn't a bereaved parent themselves and said, how are you? Everybody said, how's Bryony doing? Is she okay? People aren't interested in the dads. Please just ask them how they're doing as well. How do you move forward? Well, actually, once you start thinking about moving forward and going home, actually you have to make choices, because you can't just, much as you might want to, sit around and cry all day. Nicole said it earlier, you can't cry 24 hours a day. She's tried. I've tried as well. It doesn't work. You can cry. Crying is important, but you can't do it 24 hours a day. Steph put this up in her presentation before lunch. I put it up because I think it's really important as well. And what I take from the image on the right is not just that grief doesn't follow a nice linear cycle of how it should be and when you get to the end you're fixed, But I also look at it and I think everybody's squiggly line is different. So we have to understand that people are going to make different choices at different times based on their own individual circumstances. Some people will make the decision to take their poppy from Remembrance Sunday down with a teddy and leave it at their child's grave. Some people will make the decision that pine cones are their symbol for their baby and start stockpiling them at their child's grave. So we were trying again at the end of 2014. We weren't getting anywhere. We were trying to get IVF on the NHS and they said no, because you've successfully conceived naturally in the last 2 years and you're outside the age criteria, therefore you don't have a choice on this. If you want to do it, you have to go private. We had an appeal in on the basis of surely if your baby's died, you get some kind of special treatment. And actually what the IVF consultant said was quite telling. He said, well, I understand your circumstances, but by definition, anybody that needs IVF has exceptional circumstances. And he wasn't looking at it like a maternity professional, he was looking at it like a fertility specialist. That actually made a lot of sense to me. Because if you need help to get pregnant, regardless of whether it's because your baby died or for any other reason, actually you need help. So when he explained it like that, I kind of thought differently about our exceptional circumstances and whether they were that exceptional. They were tragic, but they weren't that exceptional in the context of fertility. But you can find shortcuts to NHS IVF treatment. If you get diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer, you get fast-tracked through. That all happened very quickly. We weren't given choices. It wasn't really discussed. Binnie was diagnosed with cancer at 2:30 in the afternoon. At 4 o'clock we got a phone call to say we'll see you at the IVF clinic at 8:30 tomorrow morning. Just like that. Which was phenomenal. Actually, we didn't want a choice in that situation. We just wanted that done. But the fact that she had to get diagnosed with cancer to be able to get that treatment is a different conversation. Even headstones are choices. So we didn't want a boring headstone. So we went and we did a lot of research on it and we found one that was cute and fun and looked like a kid's headstone because that was important to us. And the masons that were making the headstone said, because we had a long conversation with them, we talked about symbols and symbolism because they'd asked whether or not owls were particularly symbolic to us and we said no, we just like the owl. Is there anything that is symbolic to you? Said the mason. Yes, actually, pine cones. Do you want us to carve a pine cone into the chest? Would you like us to do this for you? Yes, please. So now he's got a pine cone carved into the chest of his headstone. The stonemasons gave us a choice. They're not clinical professionals. They just understood that this stuff's difficult. Celebrating Christmas is a choice. Finding ways to do it is a choice. Banning it for the first 2 years after your child dies is a choice. Celebrating it dramatically in the 3rd year is a choice. We're not quite as into Christmas as Karina and Sam, but if you have an owl as a headstone, you can put a Christmas hat on it. Putting bird feeders up in the trees behind Henry's grave was a choice for us because actually it would allow, every time I go down to visit Henry's grave and there's robins and other birds around, that's significant to us because he's got some birds. It's hard to truly explain that, but actually we're just adding something to our experience with that. And standing up and doing what all the parents that are here today do is a choice. All the parents that are here to do today do this stuff because we want to make a difference and we want to empower you guys to provide better care to others and we want to make change on the back of our tragic experiences. Not doing that's a choice as well, and that's absolutely fine too. This stuff isn't for everybody. The parents that you're hearing from today are all here and they're all stood up and speaking because they want to, because they want to make a difference, because they've chosen to. But if they don't want to, if parents just want to get on with their lives, that's fine too. But being invited to speak at the launch of the Saving Babies' Lives Care Bundle and taking up that opportunity and knowing that it's making a massive difference in terms of stillbirth reduction was a choice for me, a hugely empowering one. Seeing as we're in Salford and last night we stayed at Media City, the last time I was at Media City, I weighed about 3 stone more. My friend David and I, and you'll hear from David later, did an interview on 5 Live Breakfast in Baby Loss Awareness Week 2017, and they did a phone-in. So we did a half-hour interview, mostly David. And then they said, do you want to stay and do the phone-in with us? And I was like, oh, yes, please. Why not? And they did a full hour's phone-in between 9 and 10 in the morning, and they invited parents to ring in and talk about their experiences. BBC Radio 5 Live gave parents a choice. Even decades after their kids had died, they gave parents a choice. And it's possibly the single most powerful piece of radio that I've ever heard. And I was sat in the studio listening to it, watching the 5 Live presenter flawlessly have conversations with bereaved parents with tears running down her cheeks. And I only know she was crying because I was sat in the studio looking at her. You couldn't hear it in her voice. But we heard parents ringing in 15, 20, 25, 30 years after their child died, talking about their children like it was yesterday. And I could hear it in their voices. This is the first time anybody's ever invited them the chance to talk about their kids, because 30 years ago you weren't given any choices. And then they've got up one morning in their early 60s, turned on 5 Live, and they're talking about stillbirth. And somebody said, here's the number, do you want to ring in and talk about your baby? And they did. It's hugely empowering when you give people the opportunity just to talk. Giving a bereaved parent the choice to talk about their child is hugely empowering for them. If they don't want to, they'll tell you. Going out and doing fundraising is a choice. Getting your mates to put t-shirts on and trek 75 miles up a canal over 2 days is a choice. And trying again is a choice. It's a big choice. It's a decision that takes a lot of thought, because, and Nick touched on it this morning, when you find yourself staring down the barrel of a subsequent pregnancy after a loss, you've lost all your innocence and you've lost all your naivety, and you have no illusions anymore about what might or might not go wrong. In fact, if anything, it's gone the other way. Your expectation, your default setting is that something's going to go wrong. Just want to touch about blokes a little bit more. I found this morning when Jackie was talking about whether or not men cry. I thought, actually, this perception that men don't cry is nonsense. And I know I'm not going to overdo this because David will probably touch on it later on. But actually, first and foremost, we're human beings. And human beings are geared up to show emotion. So why would we not show emotion just because of our gender? It doesn't make any sense. And anybody that's put into a position where in trying to be a real man they don't cry, fundamentally has lost touch with the reality of human evolution. And I found something else. I'm not religious at all, but I found this next image this morning, and I put it in even though it's religiously related, because I think what it illustrates is that actually significant males in society have been happily acknowledged as crying for centuries. Jesus didn't sit the apostles down and say, don't you dare put that in the book that I cried. It's accepted. 2,000 years ago, it was fundamentally accepted that it was okay for men to cry when they were upset. So what's changed? Making traditions is significant for parents. It's important to them. Parents will find different traditions. Some parents find Christmas as a tradition. Other parents find elephants as a tradition. Pine cones is mine. Taking pine cones to the rugby games that I referee is a little way for me to take Henry to my games. But actually, some of those traditions will be hugely influenced by the care that you provide on day one, because people will start finding symbols straight away. So providing good quality care provides the opportunity for stuff like this to kick in later. Empowering people to make decisions about a safer pregnancy, whether it's an immediate pregnancy or a pregnancy after a loss, is really important. Is everybody familiar with these? Anybody not? Great. I think these are hugely empowering for choice, because in the context of the conversations that I've seen in the last couple of days about reduced movements and whether or not it's appropriate to educate parents about reduced movements and what they should do, these wallets give parents choices because they give them tools to turn around to their labour ward and say, my wallet says I need to ring you now. So they're empowering. Empowering with choice all the time makes a huge difference. Our choice was to go out to Cyprus last year for another round of IVF. This photo was taken on the first morning that we were there, at around the time our embryos were being created in the lab. Literally 20 minutes after we left the hospital, this photo was taken. So I'm sure there was a technician in a lab somewhere making embryos at the exact moment this photo was taken. And I just looked up in the sky. There's no filter on that. I just like the symbolism of what that photo represents. We made a choice to take some pine cones with us to Cyprus, only to find that actually Cyprus is full of pine trees. So we made a choice to stop at the airport on the way home and make a little cairn of pine cones, which is probably still there. And we got a positive pregnancy test, and you find out very early because it's IVF, so you know straight away. We knew at 2 weeks. And actually, this is slightly different in the context of what we're talking about today, because I believe subsequent pregnancy care is an extension of bereavement care. So we were in that situation, and we got to 8 weeks, and we had a massive bleed. Bryony had a massive bleed on a Sunday afternoon while we were up at the cemetery visiting Henry. So we phoned the EPAU, and they said, come up, we'll see you this afternoon. There's no scan slots, but if you want to come up and talk it through, you've got the choice to do that if you'd like to. Empowering with choice again. We had a scan the next morning, and Anne's let the cat out of the bag.
Sorry.
So we went into a scan at 8 weeks, absolutely expecting to be told that our baby had died, only to discover that not only was our baby absolutely fine, there were actually 2 of them. Now, in the context of the emotions that are involved in a rainbow pregnancy, to go from a scan where you're waiting to be told the worst thing to be told that actually context is totally different again, is challenging. But again, it's about empowering with choice. I could have put this slide anywhere in this presentation. At any point, this slide would have made sense. I put it in here because actually, by the time I got to that point, I knew I had power. I knew I had choice. I knew I had control. So the first person I rang when we got a positive pregnancy test was Alex Heasel. How do I get referred into your clinic? What's the process? So we transferred all our care to Manchester. It's 88 miles from Harrogate, but it was absolutely the right choice to make. These are the doors to the Tommy Stillbirth Research Centre on the 5th floor of St Mary's, and they offer parents hope, and they offer parents choices, and they offer parents relief from their anxiety, and that's what's so important about them, and that's why empowering parents to make those choices is so important. This is something I was told by my friend Jess, and most people sat on the front row of this lecture theatre know Jess. She talks very, very candidly and lucidly about rainbow pregnancy. I turned to her in the later stages of pregnancy when Brian had been admitted at 27 weeks with severe preeclampsia to St Mary's. Just tell me something positive. That's what she said. Kind of empowering. Customised growth charts, I believe, provide a choice for parents because they give them the opportunity to educate. Henry didn't have a customised growth chart. They weren't using them in 2014 in Harrogate. They started using them 4 months after Henry died. Make of that what you will. This is the one that we had last year with the twins. That's the first thing I noticed on it. What was significant about that is they put Henry's name on it. Also significant, the fact that 2 asterisks SGA means your baby was so small they were off the bottom of the scale. So if you ever hear anybody tell you that customised growth charts aren't a good option, please remember the image that I'm about to show you, which is this customised growth chart from last year with Henry's birth weight plotted on it. Customised growth charts, babies that are that small get pulled out earlier and they survive. It's as simple as that. So we were admitted at 27 weeks and they said, we'll try and get you out to 30 weeks, but we'll get the theatre ready for like 2 days because that's probably what's going to happen. They actually got her out to 34 weeks, 7 weeks of management as an inpatient with severe preeclampsia is pretty impressive. And Anne's absolutely right, twin girls.
Sorry.
I could have built that up. I could have really built it up. So that's Robin on the left and Hallie on the right. Robin was £4.5 at 34 weeks, which is a decent weight. Hallie was £5.1. And that really struck me because she weighed more at 34 weeks, even as part of a twin pregnancy, than Henry did at 38 weeks as a singleton. That's really kind of stuck with me. But it made me realise, in terms of the clinical care, how much the choices and how much the care has improved over the intervening 4.5 years. Christmas at St Mary's, New Year in Harrogate Hospital, we made the choice to take that photo, the photo that all parents are legally required to take on leaving hospital, at the entrance to the labour ward on Harrogate Hospital, not the main entrance to the hospital. Because what was significant for me is that's the door, those doors, where it's the central delivery suite to the right, those are the doors we never got to go through. So when we stopped, to take that photo, that's the point at which we were going to take it. Our choice was to take it there. Family photos don't normally look like that, but it makes a choice. You know, we will find ways to make memories and create choices with our children, even though they're not here. And the next photo I'm about to show you is what I believe to be the ultimate illustration of how impactful good quality bereavement care from midwives is on parents. Because we got transferred from the NICU at St Mary's back to the Skiboo in Harrogate, which was a real culture shock because we went from a 77 cot, all singing, all dancing, tertiary referral centre NICU with intensive care rooms, high dependency rooms, nursery rooms, to a little district general with 7 cots. And the girls pretty much, filled one room all on their own. And we were sat there one evening with the girls, and we got a knock on the door, and this lady walked in. And you met her earlier. And she was on shift on labour ward, so she'd come down the corridor to meet the girls. And so that's one of my proudest photos, because the fact that and then we had the choice to take this photo. The fact that she came down to see the girls meant the absolute world to me, because there's only one person outside of our family in the entire world who will ever hold all 3 of our children in her arms. That's why good quality bereavement care makes such a difference. Because nobody else, I can never give that term, that title to anyone else, ever. She'll always be the only person that will ever be able to say that she's done that. And what's really significant about this, and I kind of touched on it just before, we're going to find ways to make memories with our kids even though they're not here. And every time we make a choice to do something that relates to them, we're making a memory with them, but we're making a choice to do that. So when I get to do stuff with some of my best friends in the world, who I wouldn't know if either one or other of our children had survived, those are memories that I'm making with my son. Henry's not there when Steph and I did Tough Mudder in Cheshire in September, but he was there, and so was Binnie. That's a study day. Steph and Kylie and I did a study day at Russell's Hall Hospital in Birmingham. That's not just 3 parents, that's 3 kids. That's Henry and Beau and Bea making memories together. And we're doing that stuff as a trio because we're making a choice to do that. It's a recurring theme. I basically just hang out with Steph and Kylie. When we turn up at an award ceremony like the Butterfly Awards, where virtually all of my closest friends on the planet are there one year or other, because our babies died. That's why we end up at events like that. We make choices to go to those events, but the only reason we're there is because we've been dealt the worst hand imaginable. And actually, we take them with us. So any of you that have been on the study days will have seen the little elephant notes that Steph gives out for feedback. And any of you that follow her on social media will know that she takes them places and writes other babies' names on them. I do the same. So I was away at the beginning of the year in, I can't remember now, Austria. And I had some pine cones with me because I never go anywhere without pine cones now. And some of the little elephant post-it notes. And I get to write that and just leave it in a bag. Just leave it in the snow on the balcony of the hotel, and that's another choice. This is the way we're going to remember them. And actually, even now, when I go and I spend time with my living girls and people that I wouldn't know if my son hadn't died, memories that I make with the girls and those friends also include Henry, because by definition, without him, that memory wouldn't get created. Just to be clear, she didn't leave Robin in the basket on the top shelf of Home Sense in Manchester. I just want to say this because I'm really close to wrapping up, but I just want to make this point because this is really important to me, and I know it's really important to a lot of you, and I know it's really important to Anne Leyland, who sat at the front of the lecture theatre and of the photo. If anybody tells you that you shouldn't be involved in bereavement care as a student, they are wrong. Send them to me, or to David, or to Steph, or if you're at Salford, to Anne. Send them or to Nicole. Send them to any of us. because we will put them straight. Students have a huge impact on the care for bereaved parents because they have time. Because you can be supernumerary, and if all you do for an 8-hour shift is sit and hold a woman's hand while she cries, you can do that in a way that the qualified midwives that are mentoring you just can't. They don't have the capacity to do that. So anyone that says you shouldn't be involved, or it's not appropriate for you, or it's not the right time, or it's not right for the parents don't want it. They'll say no because they'll be given the choice. They'll be allowed to make an informed choice about whether or not it's right for them. But they have to be asked that question the right way. If a midwife goes in and really nervously says, "Hello, is it all right if I have a student with me?" Parents are going to say no because their defences are going to go up. If a midwife walks in and says, "Hi, I'm Lucy, I'm your midwife, I'll be looking after you today, is it all right if Steph's with me?" They're going to say yes, because, newsflash, they don't really care. They've got bigger things going on, the baby's just died. They don't really care who they get looked after by, as long as they get looked after. That's it. And to illustrate that point, I received this message from a student midwife early last year. And I'm not showing you this message because I want you to know that she'd seen me speak a couple of times and she found it really useful and it helped her provide good bereavement care. Chuffed to bits though I was that was the case. I share it with you because it wasn't very long before I knew, because the social media bereaved parent network is pretty tight, we get to know each other pretty well. It wasn't long before I knew the mum that she's talking about when she sent me this message. And I asked her if she knew that that was the first bereavement care that Georgie had provided. And she said no. I had no idea. If I was the first, it's incredible the effect she's had on us as a family. She wasn't just a midwife, she was a friend. What's significant about that is not only is she saying she's not just a midwife, she's not even mentioned the word student. She didn't even distinguish between a student midwife and a midwife. She saw her as a midwife. She didn't really care who was providing care for her. That's Georgie, the student midwife who sent the first message. And that's Edison, the rainbow brother of the little girl Adriana, whose death was being talked about in that conversation on the previous slide. And what's significant about it in the context of why students are so important to care is what it says at the top. Today I met my big sister's best friend. That's a student. That's the impact that you guys provide. So if anybody ever tells you that as students you shouldn't be involved in this care, please send them to one of us, because we will put them straight. And please get away from this. Such an easy trap to fall into. And everywhere, you listen to some of the stuff that Nick was talking about this morning, and so many of the obstacles that people will come up against within the National Health Service in terms of providing bereavement care will come from people who are uncomfortable about doing things certain ways because we've never done it like that. We've always transported our babies to the mortuary in bubble wrap, so that's how we're going to do it. We don't want to use the pram. We've never offered 3D castings because it's a nicety, it's not a necessity. That's why people are saying that, and it's wrong. And I found this image when I Googled choice on Google Images. And I put it in because what struck me when I found this image was bereaved parents' journeys can go through a number of doors once their baby's born and they're being provided care. And actually, the crux of the care that you're providing is teeing us up to know which door to open. And if you provide us with really good quality bereavement care and help us make the right choices and empower us to do the things that we're allowed to do and empower us to know the things that we're allowed to do, we're going to end up opening the door that's got some sunshine behind it. That's really important. And I like this phrase because I feel like it sums it up. Because actually, if I ask you guys to change the world as individuals, you can't. It's too big a thing for you to try and bite off on your own. But actually, just every bit of care that you provide changes the world for that family on an individual basis. And that in itself is an amazing thing. Thank you very much.